Welcome to another episode of the Strettycast. It feels like a while since we've done this, the international break, taking a toll on things. Obviously, we've had a lot to say before domestic season came to a break with the manager and results not going our way. Performance is also been an issue. And now, Nards, that you're joining me, we're going to speak a bit about the next few weeks we're going to be without Raphael Varane and Harry Maguire. That's a problem. We don't get no break, do we, when it comes to internationals?
No, it's a bit of a torrid international break for us at United, isn't it? I think losing obviously Harry before with an injury, and then obviously with Rafa Varane going on international duty as well, and then obviously him getting injured, it's a massive blow. And our two best centre halves going out injured. With the fixture list coming up as well, it's going to be a tricky couple of weeks without those two guys.
And the part of me thinks, look, maybe the deluded side of me thinks that Eric Bailly and Victor Lindelof are sitting there waiting for their chance. But the reality of it is they've had a lot of chances because for several years we haven't had a strong enough defence. They've played lots of games and haven't impressed. They haven't impressed. And the United fans have a valid reason to be going into these games worried. Because even with Varane and Maguire at the back defensively this season, we've been a bit shaky. At times the midfield still isn't 100%, still isn't protecting that back four. Are you worried, Nards? Because we are up against Jamie Vardy and Leicester. We're up against Liverpool. They're coming to Old Trafford the week after. We've Atalanta, big Champions League game. These are big games.
City. All coming up. I think, like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think every fan has seen how Bailly and Lindelof have performed at different times, and they're not starting to. And like you said, our midfield isn't particularly protecting our defence that well currently. So it is going to be a concern for us as fans, for the staff, for the team. So yes, I am a little bit concerned about it, but they've got to step up to the plate. Lindelof, I think, is a good defender. He's proven at international level, and he's proven for Manchester United that he is a good defender and he can perform any given days. Bailly, I've yet to find someone who didn't love Bailly when he first came in, and we've all seen his power, his pace, his power, his strength. It's just, he can be a bit of a liability at times as well. Let's put it that way. So it's up to them guys to step up to the plate and really perform and put themselves, in contention for a starting place, but also in the shop window if they don't want to be at the club, because obviously we're very strong in the centre half position now. So it's up to those guys to stand up to the plate, perform, and hopefully show how good they can be and why United have shown such faith in them in the past.
Phil Jones has had 7 weeks full contact training with the team now. He might think himself that he's back in the frame, and the manager has been publicly supporting him, even when times when like the Rio Ferdinand have been slating Jones for staying at the club. He did a recent podcast with the official club's app, which is really worth a listen. He speaks about his own difficulties and then dealing with social media and having to come away from that. But with the dilemma we're in now, and we're talking about the injuries to the squad with some big games coming in, Nards, could this be a time where maybe Solskjaer puts on the tactical glasses and changes things around? Because what he has stuck with throughout his reign really is a double pivot of McTominay and Fred. And with the injuries, and obviously knowing why he does that because he wants to offer defence as much support as possible, even though it doesn't always work. But maybe he might go 5 at the back this time around for these big games and change things up and take one of those players out of that double pivot to offer that support. Because Jones is fit now. Jones, if he's part of the squad, it wouldn't be ridiculous to say that he might be in with a shout this weekend or against Atalanta.
Yeah, it's not out of the question. He could potentially, I thought he'd at least be on the bench. You would expect him to be at least on the bench. Whether Solskjaer will actually have faith in him and put him straight in and, against the likes of Leicester, Liverpool, maybe Atlanta, like you said, but Solskjaer could tinker with it, but I'm pretty convinced that he'll stay with that double pivot, play 4 at the back, and have Jones on the bench should we need him.
Okay, because Jones, listen to the podcast. He doesn't sound like someone who's been put on the long finger this season, in a sense that I do think he will get chances. I know we're out of the League Cup, but you can see how quickly injuries can happen. All of a sudden, we're without our two main centre backs, and people are starting to fret. And I'm even saying that there might be a chance for Jones to get in. But that's purely down to the base that we have seen Eric Bailly, we've seen Victor Lindelof for so long, and especially as a pairing. They have not played well together in games, so that is a worry for the manager. It's an even bigger worry when the midfield isn't 100%. But something else I wanted to speak about with the Nards, looking at comments that have been made during the international break from fellow pundits. Jamie Carragher has hit out at Roy Keane and Gary Neville for over-perceived bias of Solskjaer. He claims that they don't tackle him quite like they tackle other managers when you consider that Manchester United have went to the transfer market, bought someone who's won the Champions League 4 or 5 times, a winger 75 million, Raphael Varane. That's definitely ground to mount a title challenge is what he's arguing. But I guess the bigger picture, Nards, you might agree, is that there's so many good teams going for it this season. You can't just single out one.
No, I agree. And I think by buying the players that we have, Solskjaer, Ollie's obviously brought in some unbelievable talent. It's about getting them on the pitch and getting them performing. But ultimately, when you spend that kind of money and you get those kind of players, with the huge reputations, I think it would be a bit naive to say that we shouldn't be thereabouts. Whether to win it, I still think it's another season, adding a couple of players potentially in the midfield position. But I do think Carragher's got a point in the sense that United have spent this money, bought these kind of players. They've got to be in a position where they're at least challenging or all there and thereabouts. But you're right, there is a lot of good teams now in this league. One of 4, maybe even 5 teams could think to themselves, we could be in with a chance for at least Champions League spot or pushing for the title. So it's a tough league. It's competitive, but this is a business, and it's a results business, and Solskjaer has to do something where he's at least challenging this year.
Obviously, too, during all of this international break, we had the incredibly controversial takeover of Newcastle United. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because for years and years and years, we've had, say, Abramovich at Chelsea come in, splash the cash and develop teams that were going to go on to win Premier League titles and eventually the Champions League. People seem to have a problem with him doing that back then, but the more I think of it now, I have no problem with a wealthy Russian bloke coming in, buying a football club, and having a dream and running the club pretty well. You'd have to say that Chelsea down the years have been run pretty well. We can give them praise on that. What I have a problem with is state-owned football clubs, and that's where it becomes a total different story, a total different pot of gravy. Where do you sit on this? And I know the Premier League clubs, the 19 Premier League clubs have issued warning, kind of saying that we weren't warned about this. We should have been told by the Premier League to expect this, blah, blah, blah. But it has been in the media for the past 18 months, hasn't it, that the Saudis were interested in Newcastle?
Yeah, I don't think most teams can say they're surprised with the outcome. I think it was always going on in the background, and it was just a case of getting it approved by the FA, the Premier League, and obviously the right bids that are coming in here and there, and obviously all the background stuff that we don't know a lot about. But I'm with you. I think it's no problem at all with Abramovich. I mean, he's come in, he's a billionaire, and he's managed Chelsea extremely well. He's been ruthless. He's sacked managers when others wouldn't, and he's won trophies by being ruthless, and he's put the cash in to support the club players, and it's not like he's running a club into the ground. In fact, it's the opposite. He's done a phenomenal job, I'd say, albeit being a bit ruthless at times. Whereas, like you're saying, with the state-owned clubs, and with all the human rights aspects and different things that have gone on there, for me, it's a tricky one. Let's put it that way, because we've got.
Is the Premier League just doing what it did to Manchester United then? Because before the Glazer takeover, now I'm not saying there was Newcastle fans on the street. Quite the opposite. They were out celebrating this, despite the human rights record these people hold. But before the takeover in 2005, Manchester United fans protested against that. They issued the warning calls to the Premier League and the authorities to listen. They didn't listen. and the Premier League ultimately folded its back on the fans. Now, what I see this happening with a bigger story would have been state-owned, is the Premier League is actually turning its back on itself. Because when it comes to power, ultimately, in a few years' time, when more of these owners creep in, the Premier League won't have any say. And the likes of the ESL that came and gave us a bit of a fright, that will come back to bite us in the arse.
100%. I think like you get these kind of people in power of football clubs, and the Premier League will lose in every aspect, whatever the fight may be against these individual clubs, whether it's the ESL, whether it's financial fair play, whatever you want to bring up. The Premier League are not going to be able to compete and fight against these owners with the money they've got behind them, with the history and what goes on in their own countries politically and human rights and what have you. You're right. It's quite shocking and quite scary, and quite surreal in the fact that there's a big push for the taking the knee, for example, which is great, and I fully back that. But then you counteract that with them then allowing the Saudis to come in and own a club, knowing what their track record is in their own country. So it's crazy to think about it.
There's so much because I think Sky takes responsibility in this, because they'll do these campaigns, which I'm in support of, with the rainbow laces against homophobia in football and all the sorts. But you're bringing in these owners that totally ignore that in their own countries, and that's what when we talk about Chelsea, we talk about Chelsea, and they've a wealthy owner, a Russian, that runs the football club. We talk about Newcastle. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about, and it's a total different kettle of fish. But moving on, another topic that kind of took over the international break was the scenes after the match against Everton at Old Trafford, when Sir Alex Ferguson was caught on camera talking to UFC fighter Khabib. Now, this was totally overanalyzed in the media. It was just Ferguson having a chinwag with a fellow sportsman. But he said something along the lines that you always start your best players. Now, you played under Sir Alex Ferguson. He didn't always do that.
He didn't always do that, but he got the results needed. So it's and it was the circumstances. So I totally understand the fans' frustration. It's the circumstances in which Ronaldo was on the bench. And I know when Ronaldo came on, we were winning, so it's not all there. It doesn't all add up. But ultimately, with two poxy-friendly games against Qatar and Luxembourg that Portugal had, Ronaldo really didn't need a rest. I mean, to say that, it's crazy. It was the circumstances in which it was done. And in those circumstances, Everton, which is a tough game, and the last Premier League game for at least a couple of weeks, you have, in my opinion, got to start your best players and your best team. And Fergie probably wouldn't come out and say that, and it could have been twisted and overanalyzed, like you said. But I do understand why certain fans are frustrated with it.
I'm going to sit on the fence this one, or maybe even play devil's advocate, because when we signed Cristiano Ronaldo, you also have to realize that a few months prior to that, we fought on our back to get Cavani on an extended deal. And when Ronaldo arrived, I still don't expect him. Now I kind of do, because of the backlash Solskjaer got, but I didn't expect him to play every week. And I know he has done pretty much up until this point, apart from a few knocks with Juventus and so on. But Cavani is another player in his late 30s who is of the same mold. Maybe not of the same mold of being Ballon d'Or winner, but Cavani's one of the best in the world as well. And I think Solskjaer shouldn't be too criticized for changing that around. And the reason it does is because of circumstances, and we didn't win that game. Performances of late haven't been great, but ultimately he's going to change it around. There's going to be games where he's going to have to play Cavani, because Cavani wanted to go back home to Uruguay or to Argentina, and they asked him to stay an extra year. Now, for Solskjaer to turn around and to keep him on the bench every week, that would be very unfair. And I know it's not starting Ronaldo, but Cavani's he scores goals.
Oh yeah, and I love Cavani. I mean, what he did when he came on against, who was it, Villarreal, when he came on, I think he just completely changed the whole aspect of the game. His work rate, winning balls back, they had no right to win. He's a 22-year-old trapped in a 36-year-old's body, whatever age he is. The fitness levels he's got, as with Ronaldo. So yeah, I agree with you. I love Cavani, but with the build up, the previous games, which we kind of got lucky in a couple of circumstances with results, last minute goals, stuff like that. You've got to go into the international break. You've got to go into the international break with a home game with 3 points. Yeah. And for me, it wasn't the time to drop our, potentially our match winner in Ronaldo. And who say he could have played both of them? If you want to start Cavani, play both of them. Build your team around that strike force if you need to. It was just because with Everton having so many injuries as well and not at full strength, it was a poor result and a poor way, and it gave a lot of United fans 2 weeks just to moan about it. But it's a long season. There's lots of things to go, and like you say, Ronaldo will not play every game, and I don't expect him to play every game. It was just the circumstances, as I keep saying.
I'm not going to ask you to name out your starting 11 to face Leicester at the weekend, but who is in your midfield?
I'm McTominay, Pogba, Fernandes.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. And to be honest, Nards, I don't think whatever midfield he names, I think someone will have a complaint.
Yeah.
I think there's someone out there that say that's not good enough. You should go with this. But ultimately, I don't think right now we can see the right fit. Hopefully throughout the season that something works out, that someone starts performing out of their skin and makes the position their own. That's what we can really hope for right now. But yeah, look. We'll end that on that note. Are you optimistic heading into these run of fixtures?
Do you know what? I think this is going to sound terrible, but every time I watch United, I never go into the game really, really confident, because I know we could be unbelievable against some of the top teams, but then when we come across some of the lower teams, we don't seem to perform. So I'm never 100% confident anymore. I'll always give 100% support and I'll always back us to win. But I think United, the players, the staff, the manager have got a lot to prove before we can start thinking we're going into every game now expecting a win, because we've drawn and lost against teams that we just really shouldn't have. So cautiously optimistic is what I'd say.
And don't forget, we'll be talking more about it next week, but the return of Marcus Rashford is on the cards, and that's a really, really good thing for Manchester United. I'm looking at that team to start the season, Nards. And once we can shore up those two flanks and have Rashford on the left and maybe Sancho on the right, who, by the way, got 2 assists for England the other night, so hats off to him, going on the back of this international break with a bit of form. So he might get a start against Leicester at the weekend and get off the mark finally for United. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the Strettycast and you'll hear from us again soon. Up the Reds.